Which projects are you supporting in Ukraine?
About 30 projects now running.
Which fields?
Trembita,
Offshore zones.
we were taken off the list.
Escalating tensions between Estonia and Russia.
You cannot let it go unpunished.
Skymo.
Lasting already for 6 years, I presume. That also reduces the willingness
Of investors to come to
Ukraine. Exactly.
Cybercenter NATO.
Has not created any effective system to fight those cyber issues.
Hello, I present today a new episode of my program Eurointegrators, and my guest today is Ambassador of Estonia in Ukraine, Gert Antsu. Hi, Gert.
Hello.
Estonia is known to support other countries and provide some resources for that. Which projects are you supporting in Ukraine?
Well, supporting other countries is important, of course, especially from a moral point of view. Estonia got a lot of support from the EU, from its neighbors, from other rich countries, and it played a big part in our quick development. So we are now trying to help our friends. And Ukraine is the most important country for our development cooperation. Nearly half of our development cooperation resources go to Ukraine, which, well, it's because Ukraine's future is important to us. It's close by, geopolitically, obviously, very important, involved in a huge struggle, and well, it's a difficult moment for the country. First the war, second building up the country after the Revolution of Dignity, so it's quite natural. And also because we come from a comparable background. Well, we were part of the Soviet Union 30 years ago, so our experts have gone through similar reforms, and the reforms that we have made in Estonia are useful for Ukraine and are perhaps more directly relevant than otherwise fabulous things done in Western Europe, for example. Sure, there is a lot to learn from them as well, but I have seen it with my own eyes as well, that when Ukrainian teachers or officials see Estonians who can explain it also in Russian, for example, without interpreters, then the reaction is more kind of immediate. So it is important. What we are doing in Ukraine, well, we are trying to contribute to the development of Ukraine in the direction of a normal country, you would say.
No, but which fields?
First of all, governance, including increasing transparency. For example, well, we have about 30 projects now running. And to think about, well, transparency, governance, well, there is one project which is a joint project which is mostly funded by the European Union, the ULEAD project, but also Estonian and Swedish financing. And part of it is building an e-governance system, kind of a platform which is binding all information systems. We call it X-Road in Estonia. The same company that built it in Estonia is doing it, won the public tender and is doing it in Ukraine. And it will be called Trembita, and it should be ready by the end of this year. So it's
what that will do?
Well, basically, it makes it possible for all systems to talk to each other. Me using my computer or mobile phone, or the police or court systems, or different ministries or hospitals, or well, the whole possibility of accessing databases or giving digital signatures, for example. It's kind of a decentralized system. Every institution has its own system, but to make sure that they can all exchange data, that they can work together. And hopefully that will give a major boost to the development of e-governance in Ukraine as well. Or then another example on transparency, our experts are helping NABU, training the employees of NABU, well, to increase their professionalism, and I guess that's very important as well. Then another field is education, because, well,
Education system, you mean?
Educational system, in a way, yes. A good example is professional education, professional and technical education, which, well, we know it very well from our own experience. 10, 20 years ago, the equipment was completely outdated in Estonia. Technical or vocational education had a very bad prestige, a very bad reputation, and we have managed to turn it around. So we are glad to share our experiences, to update curriculum, in Ukrainian vocational institutions, for example, and to help to modernize. And maybe one final area where we are concentrating is supporting entrepreneurship, especially in the eastern part of Ukraine. We are giving small grants to IDPs, for example, who have moved away from their home, have had to leave everything behind, and who have to find new livelihoods. So we are making it possible to, well, along with many other donors, of course, but still contributing our part so that they could start a new business, baking bread or pies or what have you.
Ukrainian Cabinet of Ministers included Estonia to the list of offshore zones. Why they did that and how you deal with this problem?
Well, indeed, we were included in the list of low tax jurisdictions, which came as a complete surprise, because usually you put there territories which are really offshores, which do not exchange information with Ukraine, for example. And Estonia at the same time is well, among the most transparent countries in the world. And as our tax system is very simple, straightforward, transparent, so we really don't have anything to hide, and yeah, hence our surprise. Well, we were able to explain that we don't belong in that list of countries, and as we were taken off the list, well, in a month's time, so that shows that we really did not belong there.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is about dynamic of cooperation and investments in Ukraine, and which problems or wins your investors have.
Well, I'm happy, first of all, that the bilateral trade between the countries is increasing again. It increased by 30% last year, and it shows that, well, we are interesting for each other, and that our companies are competitive enough to compete in each other's markets. And it's, of course, good for both of us. And also as regards investments, well, as Ukraine has always been an important destination for Estonian investments. And I'm happy to see more and more Ukrainian investment now coming to Estonia. Because, well, it's a favorable business environment, it's a small country, and thus a simple environment. And for many
tax system.
including the tax system, but also establishing a company takes 18 minutes online, and everything is really straightforward.
But I heard that companies should be, and money should be very clean, because reporting system and checking system is very strong.
Well, it's become very strict, but not only in Estonia, but overall. I mean, hiding dirty money is in the West, I mean, it's becoming ever more difficult, or near impossible soon, I gather. But also Estonia can serve as a first step to Europe, to Northern Europe, which is very close to Estonia, but overall, for example, for a Ukrainian company to establish a branch in Estonia, maybe to do some final stages of production in Estonia, and then go to the European market. Many have taken up that opportunity. As regards Estonian investment in Ukraine, it's moving in the right direction on the one hand. On the other hand, there have been some, well, much publicized problematic cases with Estonian investors, and
like Sky Mall?
Like Sky Mall, for example, well, which is lasting already for 6 years, I presume. And the Estonian owner of the shopping mall has won 8 times in arbitrage in the UK, but nothing has happened here, and his property rights are not defended. And well, many in Ukraine, many journalists would know that case. But let's say from the Ukrainian viewpoint, unfortunately, many know it in Estonia as well. So when the media in Estonia is often talking about those cases, that also reduces the willingness
of investors
to come to Ukraine. Exactly.
Yeah. What is your opinion in cooperation and reforms in defense sphere in Ukraine?
Well, there is quite a bit happening in our bilateral cooperation in the field of defense as well. Estonia, as a member of NATO, well, our military has participated at different operations in the world, and some kind of part of our modernization, taking over NATO standards. We've learned a lot, and certainly we've We are glad to share our experiences with the Ukrainian colleagues as well. And I know there are Estonian experts, trainers involved in training Ukrainian military forces, for example. Secondly, well, we have been discussing the territorial defense and the kind of broader participation in defense of the whole society. This is something which is still developing in Ukraine, and I believe that Estonia can serve as a good example in that broader cooperation. So just yesterday, actually, the head of the Estonian Defense League, the voluntary organization in defense in Estonia, was visiting Ukraine in Kiev, Mariupol, and we are glad to share our expertise in that field.
Escalating tensions between Estonia and Russia, problems with diplomats, problems with border guards, entering of Russian aircraft Estonian airspace. Is it a coincidence or hybrid war?
I wouldn't say that it has changed much or that it is changing much over the last years. And whether it's a hybrid war, well, that's a difficult question in itself, because, well, what is a hybrid war? If it would be, well, many would say that there is a hybrid war against Ukraine. Well, if there is a hybrid war against Ukraine, probably there isn't any against Estonia, because the situations are so different. But
was it in Estonia when they arrested border guard?
Well, yes, there was an Estonian police officer who was kidnapped by the Russians on the Estonian side of the border. And he spent many months in Russia before we were able to exchange him. But overall, I think it's not just about Estonia. Russia is waging a hybrid war against the Western civilization, you might say. And Estonia being part of the EU, part of NATO,
and bordering country.
And the bordering country, sure.
Russia.
I think the main point of that is that well, Russia or anyone else who is violating the norms of international law, you cannot let it go unpunished. You have to take measures, and deterrence meaning that well, if someone is continuously, systematically violating international law, well, then you should take countermeasures like the US and others have applied sanctions on Russia for that. And obviously a big part of that is the aggression against Ukraine, annexation of the Crimea, and the ongoing war. Well, the other side of it, dialogue, well, you need dialogue to discuss it, to make it clear. Why does one have sanctions? Why deterrence? And to explain what we see that Russia should do.
Do you think it will help?
I think if anything helps, deterrence is the thing. Because there is no way of reaching a quick solution, fixing it overnight anyway. But having sanctions which are having a real impact on the Russian economy, through that, well, in a more longer term, on the Russian society and its politics, that's our only hope, really.
One more guest will join our interview now. The head of the NGO Ukrainian Information Security Group, Konstantin Korsun. Good afternoon, Konstantin.
Так, доброго дня. Чую.
I have a question for both of you. On the territory of Estonia, there is a NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence. What does this provide to Estonia, and is there cooperation with Ukraine on this? Is it effective?
Ukraine is located in the epicenter of great cyber war of the world's history. This fact is globally confirmed by the leading states, including the European Union. Estonia in April 2007 suffered massive cyber attack inspired by Russia. But as far as I know, Estonia had built effective system of cyber security since that time. Unfortunately, we here in Ukraine have a 5 years long cyber war organized by Russia, but the country has not created any effective system to fight those cyber issues. Dear Ambassador, what do you think? Why Ukraine is still facing cyber challenges?
Estonia indeed got off to an early start in 2007 already, so we have had 10 years to build up our own systems, and also it's 10 years exactly now that the NATO Center of Excellence is located in Estonia, which certainly has helped as well, because that gathers the really world-level know-how in the field of cyber defense in Estonia, and Estonian experts can work together with the international ones. And there is cooperation, and talk about further cooperation between that center and Ukraine as well. And I hope very much that it will develop further in the future as well. But I'm sure what I have heard, of course, is the attacks Ukraine has been facing over the last 5 years. It's altogether on a different scale than those denial of service attacks that we had 11 years ago. So it is more difficult for Ukraine, including attacks on critical infrastructure. So I presume it's not so easy. Ukraine serves as a kind of a testing ground for Russia, I'm afraid, in that field, and it takes a lot of effort to fight against that.
Do you see cooperation between Ukraine and Estonian Center of Excellence and NATO in the cyber defense sphere?
Well, sure, there is cooperation, but I'm also sure there could be much more.
Why do you think it's not enough?
Well, it just hasn't developed so quickly, and all those big things take a bit of time.
Konstantin, do you agree with this assessment?
I'm not sure that 4.5 years is a short period that was possible to create some base of national cyber security during that period of time. I agree with the ambassador. The European Union and NATO don't pay enough attention to help in Ukraine of creating such a system. I have got one more question regarding state and private partnership in field of cyber security. So, dear ambassador, how does it work in Estonia and how it would be made here in Ukraine?
Sure, the government cannot do everything on its own, so it's very important the part of private companies in the process. They have know-how, they can contribute certainly to cybersecurity, but even more, actually, we have a voluntary organization, or part of a voluntary organization, Cyber Defense League, where people who are IT experts doing their normal IT work during the day, and then in their free time they are contributing their skills to the cyber defense of the country. So I guess this is something other countries could learn from Estonia as well.
I think this is an example of how we also have a Ukrainian cyber alliance, which helps us to check and verify how secure our critical infrastructure is. Doesn't really help us on a systematic basis. What do you think about this, Kostya?
Yes, it's very good that the volunteers do the right job, but if we want to have much more effective system, we should understand that it's not enough. For example, when the Great Britain made their cyber system, it had about £1 billion of donation. So the system of state and private partnership should work like the government is financing and coordinating the cyber security development, and donate private companies which are engaged in a process. And each company engaged makes what they can do. One provides an equipment, one deals with deals with the soft, and one is responsible for high-level experts. So I would say this is a right way of a state and private partnership. Dear Mr. Ambassador,
sure.
Do you agree?
That's how it could work. The only sad side of it, of course, in most countries like Estonia, is that we don't have the £1 billion. We have to manage with considerably less money, but sure.
Well, you understand, it is a question of money, first of all, Konstantin. The UK has billions of pounds, and Estonia doesn't. And I think Ukraine, unfortunately, doesn't have it either.
Yes, I do realize Estonia had not enough money, and Ukraine also lacks needed funds for the projects, but they helped Estonia to find money for creating a system, and there was not such an assistance for Ukraine, the country that has been suffering the war. I wanted to know why. This is my question.
Seen in Ukraine, still there are institutions which are responsible for cyber defense, not least the National Security Council and other, which is doing the coordination part, and other institutions are involved as well. So I feel that institutionally, at least, Ukraine is getting there. And then the substance work, well, whether it could be a bit faster or not, I don't really feel that I'm competent enough to comment on that.
Я зрозумів, що він не досить компетентний.
Well, I've got what you said.
But we do get help from Estonia and from the NATO Cybersecurity Center as well. Do you know about
Так, я
this?
знаю про це. Є
But
окремо
as
від
far as I
НАТО,
know,
окремо
we
від
have an
Європейського
assistance from
Союзу,
NATO and
Європейського Союзу
EU.
близько протягом останніх
Ukraine received about 5 million euros for the past few years, but I'm sure it was not enough anyway.
НАТО – це окремо, а Європейський Союз – окремо. Це ж, власне, різні організації, так я розумію.
Sure, but well, the part of the European Union, which indeed has been contributing quite a bit, and as I understand also there are discussions about deepening that cooperation. It's certainly important as well, because defense, cybersecurity of a country doesn't only have a really hard military component, but it's more broader than that. The overall cyber hygiene and many other things that could improve the resilience of a country in that field.
But do you know who is actually responsible in Estonia for your cybersecurity? Do you know the structure or not?
I guess
I know,
more or less.
because I know more or less. I know that you have this Ministry of Economy and Communication, and there is a Deputy Minister for Communication, under whom is analog of Ukrainian DSZI. And here is actually main cybersecurity and defense build. It's more than several hundred people, as far I know. At least it's when I was on a training in your country. But the differences between Ukraine, when I returned back from Estonia, having all these knowledges, I understand that our system is much more spread. So there is at least 3 different centers who have some cyber component in their responsibilities.
Well, Estonia is a small country,
Yes.
and we know that in order to achieve things, we have to be really efficient. In a way, it's an advantage, of course, as well. We don't have thousands of people dealing with the field. We don't have thousands of people to coordinate. So, but I think our kind of institutional efficiency is one of the main strengths that we do have in Estonia. That.
Костянтина, дякую вам дуже за те,
Прошу,
що доєдналися
прошу.
до нашого ефіру. But in overall, during last 4 or 5 years, do you see an escalation or calming down? I mean, not only Ukraine conflict, but also in overall relations with Russia on all territory of the world, their participation in different conflicts. So do you see an escalation or do you see calming down?
Well, there's clear an escalation. When the Ukrainian war started in 2014, well, it was something far away in Ukraine, if you look from the western side. Now there are things happening. The Russian intervention in the US elections in 2016, the attempt
French
to
election.
the French elections, well, the attempt to murder Mr. Skripal in the UK, the attempt to hack the organization dealing with chemical weapons in The Hague. All that is bringing the Russian threat and the real Russian actions closer to them, to the citizens of Western European countries or the United States. So it's not something far away in Ukraine, but something that really has an impact on Western societies. 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was really the experts mostly who were concerned with that, and the general population not really. I mean, well, ISIS was the main threat, or global warming, but not really Russia. And I think that threat perception, well, which we have shared in our countries, obviously, for a long time, but that is reaching a broader audience in the West now as well.
Which big security projects are currently implemented in Estonia?
It's difficult to talk about concrete big projects, because our building up our national defense, it's a process that has lasted for, well, the 27 years now of our independence, a bit more even, and maybe 1 or 2 things. One that we seem to have gotten right compared to many other countries is that we have always kept conscription. Like Estonian young men are supposed to serve in the army, and they are forming the reserve of our army. And many countries, also in our region actually, gave up on conscription because it felt that, well, the world is becoming a more secure place. Yes, there are threats, but they are maybe somewhere further away. You only need, well, a certain number of troops to fly them out into more distant parts of the world to contribute to global security. But of course now the threats closer to home have become even more visible. So the whole broader concept of defense, if you will, not only the professionals and the equipment, but also the reserve and the territorial defense, the role of voluntary participants in our defense as well, that is becoming more important, and the involvement of, well, even private companies, for example, who should let their employees to take part in exercises, for instance, or then local governments who have their own role to play in the territorial defense. So the last big exercise, military exercise we had in Estonia, called SEAL or Hedgehog, it was exactly concentrating on that, the kind of broader aspects of it, including local governments, for example.
Thank you, Mr. Antsu, for joining our program. Thanks to all who watched us. See you in a week.